Hello out there, and welcome to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com. I'm Caleb, and I'm joined by Alan here. And yeah, sorry if any of you saw the first one click up and then you clicked on it. This is it's happening now. I just user error there for a second. So we've had quite a crazy week. I feel like in Gamecock athletics since we talked last week about Nicholas Harbor and all the drama surrounding that signing, which was actually, really fun. Probably the biggest recruiting battle that I've been a part of since, taking over here. But let's talk a little bit about the 2024 class and what that looks like going forward. So South Carolina already has four commits in the 2024 class. And they're all 4 stars. So you have Dante Reno, Cam Pringle, Michael Smith, Wendell Gregory, and then the most recent was this past week in Mazio Bennett. Now we have heard a little bit from some of Rivals National that we'll see if Mazio Bennett continues to hold that 4 or maybe is a high 3, whatever. Either way, off to a great start. And they are now ranked number 7, if I'm not mistaken, in the 2024 rankings, which, there's still a long way to go. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's where they're going to end up. But if you're going to end up in that top 10 or whatever you want to, whatever metric you want to go by, you have to start strong, and they're certainly starting strong. I'll have a full weekly recruiting wrap up here probably Friday. Actually, they're number 5 in the Rivals recruiting rankings right now, after Mazio Bennett committed last week. So the only SEC teams ahead of them right now are LSU and Georgia. So you're in pretty good shape at the moment if you can kind of hold on to that momentum. Like I said, weekly recruiting wrap up this week will focus a lot on what the 2024 hot board is looking like and some of the timelines of that. But a couple of names for those of you that just listen to the podcast and don't yet subscribe to GamecockScoop.com, although you definitely should. Blake Franks, lineman out of Greenville High School, Mazio Bennett's teammate. Expecting him to make a decision between Clemson and South Carolina sometime this month, or at least that was kind of the timeline that he was aiming for last that I heard. For a long time, that felt like a definite Clemson guy. But over time, I've gotten more and more confident that at the very least it's 50-50. You might even call it a little bit of a South Carolina lean at this point. We talked a little bit last week or 2 weeks ago about why that might be. Also, if you scroll GamecockScoop.com back just a couple of days, Adam Friedman, who is Rivals recruiting analyst, national recruiting analyst, did kind of a breakdown of South Carolina and Clemson and how they seem to be trending in different directions right now on the recruiting trail. So you finally got the big win, got over the hump with South Carolina pulling off the upset versus Clemson in Death Valley on the football field this year, and then it seems like that momentum is continuing into the 2024-2025 classes, especially in state. So South Carolina has an opportunity to land the top 3 guys in state for South Carolina with Mazio Bennett, Josiah Thompson, and Cam Pringle. Of course, they've already got 2 of those 3, and then I would say they lead pretty heavily for Josiah Thompson. So yeah, I mean, you're locking down the state. You're already pulling some highly rated guys from out of state. Dante Reno, of course, from New England. Wendell Gregory from Georgia. He's one of the top 5 linebackers, top 10 at the very least, linebackers in this 2024 class. So really off to a good start. I'm going to talk a lot more about some of the guys they're in with. Another person to look for or look ahead to maybe that they're going to have to go up against some of the top universities from around the country on is edge Dylan Stewart. Right now he's rated as a 4-star, but I mean, he's one of the top 1 or 2 edges in the country. Actually, Adam Friedman or Adam Gorney. Sometimes I get them confused. You know,
we got a couple items covering recruiting here.
Just wrote about whether or not they think he's going to get his 5th star. And of course, a lot of that's going to depend on camp season and senior seasons and all those sorts of things. But I think he's got a good chance of ending up as a 5-star guy as well. So not that I'm saying South Carolina is definitely going to land him, but I have a future cast in for them to land him because he's from that DB area, and it kind of just seems like things have been trending that way. But like I said, it's going to be a long process there. You're going to have to go up against the top of the top. When I put in that future cast, it's kind of like when I put in the future cast for Nicholas Harbor in August, where it's like, I do think that they have the inside track, but you're going to have a process.
That's another one that might go down to signing day, which obviously is almost a full year from now.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy that the 2024 class is already ranked. What I say, 5th?
5th, yep.
5th. Because when you look at the 2023 class at the same time, there was no recruits committed to South Carolina until March when Zabari Sandy did that last year. So definitely off to a much hotter start. And you hope that momentum continues to encourage other people to come. As Shane Beamer usually tweets when he gets a commit quickly after someone else is committed, that great players want to play with great players, or whatever it is that he says, is something like that. And that's true. I mean, recruiting momentum is a real thing. Other football notes are not, one is not very positive. So we got some breaking news over the weekend that 3 of the freshmen from that 2023 class we were just talking about, or I guess 2 freshmen, 1
Anthony Rose
sophomore, have been suspended from the team. So that's edge freshman Montague Rames, DB Cameron Upshaw, who's another freshman, and then rising sophomore Anthony Rose, who saw some action near the end of the season. We can't share a ton about it, but you can kind of look up some of those names in the public record right now and find out a good bit. So I encourage you to do that. And as far as just like speculation on the suspension, how long it'll be, all those sorts of things, let me preempt it by saying it's pure speculation, whatever. But my understanding of the situation right now is that Anthony Rose would probably have the hardest path back to the team, or the hardest path for it to be a quick fix for him to get back to the team, but that the other 2 guys might have a slightly easier path. Again, not going to speculate too much. It's their personal lives and legal system to work out. And you guys can check out the public record on all that.
We've got a story on the website too, if you scroll back to Friday when this first broke.
Yep. But yeah, obviously that's never a good thing to have guys within your program getting in trouble. Hasn't really been much of a thing that we've seen.
Those are the first arrests of the Shane Beamer era.
Yeah. But anytime you're managing 85 young men, sometimes those teenagers, make mistakes, and you just gotta hope that everyone learned their lesson and can bounce back from this in a positive way. And yeah, I don't think that we're certainly not to like the Mark Richt Georgia era right now.
Steve Spurrier. I wish we could play them in week 2 every year because they usually still have a few players suspended.
Yeah, exactly. So we're not to a point where I think that there are a lot of institutional questions with all this or anything like that. But something to keep an eye on, something to keep track of, and we'll obviously update GamecockScoop.com as soon as we know anything else about length of suspension or path back for those guys. Most likely, none of those guys were gonna. Well, maybe Anthony Rose could have worked his way into the 2 deep. And then Rames, of course, is an edge. So with how thin that position is, maybe he was going to work his way into the 2 deep as well. But we'll just have to see how that all plays out. On a more positive football note, or I guess general athletics note, you went to a big announcement about an announcement.
That's
Press
kind of the
conference
way.
yesterday.
That's kind of the way I put it when we were called yesterday. Yeah, it kind of felt like an announcement for an announcement.
Yeah. So what are you able to share from what they shared with the media on that?
All right. So yesterday, the University of South Carolina announced they are putting out a RFI. That is a request for information about areas of land, mostly around Williams-Brice Stadium, but there's a little bit outside Colonial Life Arena too. It totals over 900 acres of land, and they are calling developers, calling, I guess, like city planners, that kind of thing. People who have done this in other markets, other stadiums, other whatever, and they're trying to figure out, as they put it, Ray Tanner used the term blank canvas with us on the record. He thinks this is a blank canvas. They have put out a call for what they think they can build, whether that's restaurants, hotels, more tailgating areas. I don't know how this is going to impact parking. He talked about how they're trying to make some more upgrades inside the stadium to concessions, bathrooms, luxury suites, all that kind of thing. It was a whole lot of, well, we're just trying to see what we can do, but we want to do something, was kind of my takeaway. And Ray Tanner did say that best case scenario, it would be 12 to 15 months before they could actually start building and moving dirt on this thing. But yeah, you had an announcement about some kind of project coming up to the development outside Williams-Brice Stadium and Colonial Life Arena.
Yeah, and I don't want to speculate too much. I wasn't in the meeting, obviously. And I've heard a lot of different things from a lot of different people over the course of several months. This is something that's been kind of brewing for a bit. I do think that this is a really big deal. I do think that it is greatly going to enhance the game day experience. And the clearest, if I'm just trying to give an example, the clearest vision that I have at least heard, but again, it sounds like it's still very much up in the air. So, if it doesn't end up exactly like this, don't quote me on it. Is if anyone's ever been to like Foxborough, Patriots Place, like that, where it's like shops and hotels and game day vibes and whatever else. It sounds like that could be potentially in the cards here, but it sounds like that they're still just kind of looking around at what the options are, and then we'll announce more later once they start to narrow that down.
They said that they sent out that RFI yesterday. Not a lot of specifics on where that was going, what companies or businesses might be coming into Columbia to actually look at this piece of land, but they said it'd be about a 4-week process just to get the results of the RFI back for what they could actually do, and then they're going to go from there. So I would just say sit tight, y'all. I mean, it's going to be, like I said, at least a month before they know what they can do, another year at least, according to them, before they can actually start doing it. And then obviously construction, you guys know how that goes. But they did, one important thing to mention is they said that it would not impact football season. They're not going to be, you're not going to have I don't know if any of you guys watched games at Oregon State football last year. They're doing renovations there and they got half their stadium like tarped off trying to build in the middle of the season. That's not going to happen. They're not doing that at Willie B. At least that's what they said they weren't going to do. It's going to be a phased out kind of development through the off seasons, but at least the idea, you know how construction goes, but the idea is this will not directly impact football Saturdays in the fall through what would probably be at least a season or two, maybe more, of trying to actually build this.
Yeah. And to me, it sounds like the idea is to stay ahead of the competition for game day experience. I mean, obviously they've done a lot of upgrades over the last decade with the new screen and, different
the light show.
Yeah. Different enhancements. Oh yeah. The light show this year. So they're just continuing to try to stay ahead of the game, which is what you're going to have to do, especially when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to keeping people in the seats when they could just watch it at home or whatever. So I think it's a good move. I think it's a progressive, like future looking, getting ahead of the curve sort of move. And yeah, we'll let you know as we are allowed to report more.
You're probably talking about years plural before you can pull up to Willie B on a Saturday 5 hours before the game and have this whole district ready at your disposal, if that's what they want. But yeah, it's there, it's in the works. They're trying to do something. ...
Yeah, and remind me exactly where all the land is, because I know a lot of people were speculating the fairgrounds and stuff, but it's
not the fairgrounds. It is It is over 900 acres, and I believe the number was in the packet, 840. And they put a video up, by the way, for those of you on the official South Carolina account. There's a video up right now with like the land kind of survey. They have it divided into kind of different zones of what they're thinking. It's just an artist rendering. It's not a rendering of what it's going to look like, what they're trying to build. It's just, this is the land we're using. So I would encourage you to go check that out on social media if you haven't yet. But it is land mostly outside Williams-Brice Stadium, kind of some of the areas you guys might know is parking lots currently out to the grass. I know some of it's on a floodplain. That could be an issue. And then there's a little bit of land outside Colonial Life Arena too, which we were kind of not given as much information about what that might look like or lead to.
Cool. Very cool. So yeah, something to kind of look ahead to, but not something that you're going to get a ton of info, or definitely not anything that you're going to see manifest physically for quite some time. Before we go to men's basketball, I know we usually do men's basketball before women's basketball, but I mean, let's be honest, this is a pretty big week for women's basketball right now. So the women's team goes into Hartford, Connecticut over the weekend, beats number 5 UConn. First time they've ever won in Hartford. Pretty impressive game. Started slow, trailed for pretty much the entire first half until right before halftime they were able to tie it up, and then led for pretty much the entire second half, though the final few minutes got a little bit hairy. You were up there. Tell me a little bit about the game day environment in UConn. You've seen Colonial Life Arena, who obviously shows up for the number 1 team. 29 straight wins.
That was number 29 on Sunday.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how did you feel like that environment compared?
That's a crazy environment. It's weird because they do. I don't know how all the specifics work. They have their campus and stores, which is, I believe, like a 10,000 seat arena, and they have this kind of convention center-y. I think there's a hockey team that plays their thing in Hartford that holds 16,000, and they kind of push the bigger games there, as my understanding of it, which normally you'd be like, oh, they take the big games off campus. That sucks. But I walked up and I saw buses of students who busted. It's only 45 minutes. Connecticut's small, but buses of students who came in from stores in the morning. Place was sold out, rocking. That was a very, Raven Johnson said it post game. Dawn Staley said it post game. That was a very difficult environment for them to play in. That place was jumping the whole time. Definitely the toughest road environment they've played in all year. There was over 15,000 people, and it's just good. To me, it's good tournament simulation because that's what you're going to have in March, what you're trying to do in April, ideally, if you're South Carolina. And you have to be able to play in those kinds of environments, and they're going to have another one Sunday with a sold-out 18,000 Colonial Life Arena expected for LSU.
Yeah, at least this one will be.
That'll be in your favor, but
that one will be at your back. Yeah, so kind of a weird game, but also I feel like it followed the script that did Steven do the preview, or did you do the preview?
Steven did the preview. Yep.
Yeah, so Steven Anderson does the women's basketball previews usually. And he kind of said that obviously UConn can match up from a talent perspective in a way that very few teams in the country can. But they don't necessarily match up from a depth perspective, especially with the injuries that they've had this year. And I think we kind of saw that play out. They started strong, got out to a big start, but then as South Carolina went to their bench, and their bench outscored the opponent's bench again by like 70 points.
37-0.
Yeah.
They're up over, I have a stat in my latest, or one of my, I wrote 3 things this week, but one of them, there's a stat in there. They are over 600 points in the positive on bench points versus bench points this season, which is absurd in 23 games to be over 600 points positive. But no, and kind of what changed that game to me, and this is one of the things I wrote about on, you can still find it on GamecockScoop.com, is the Raven Johnson, Camila Cardoso connection. That's something Dawn's talked about early in the year. She actually started Raven Johnson at the beginning of the year and dropped her to the bench in the 3rd game because she wanted Raven and Camila to be off the bench together, playing at the same time. They played together before college. They have this connection, as she put it. And Raven Johnson, career high in points, career high in assists, career high in minutes, pretty much career high in everything at UConn as your backup point guard, who did play most of the game, in fairness. And then Cardoso just, I mean, we know what she can do. She's 6'7". She's been kind of the 6th woman most of the year, but that was another level of dominance in that game against a UConn team that really just couldn't handle the size inside.
Yeah, that was, and there was a little bit of controversy, I guess, after the game, because, in my opinion, and within the rules of the game, South Carolina out physicaled them.
Yes.
And Gino Auriemma, well, he got a technical during
That
the
was, I did want to
game.
bring that up because that was one of the most am I in outer space things I've seen covering a game. It's South Carolina is up 6. There's a little less than 3 minutes to go. UConn is bringing the ball up the floor, trying to cut it to 4-3. Look down for a second, look back up. I see a water bottle on the court and the ref pointing right at Gino, making the tech motion. I guess he spiked it. I didn't see that initially. I thought it was a throw. Either way, right in front of the referee in a game like that, there is no debate there. There is no controversy. If you throw something on the court, that is a tech, period, end up. Like, it's not even a question. And that ended up, South Carolina got 2 free throws and the ball, hit both free throws. Aaliyah Boston hits a jumper. That is a 4-point swing in a game South Carolina won by 4 points. It was pretty stupid by Gino. And he did admit that afterwards, but he also said a lot of other things about the officiating that have been in the news cycle now. What is this, day 4 since the game?
Yeah, so I kind of saw the headline yesterday. I didn't see any of the post-game stuff, to be honest. So I was kind of confused at first, but apparently he basically said that it's not basketball. What South Carolina
That was the exact
playing.
quote. Yep.
It's appalling what teams do to Lou Lopez Senecal, is who he was talking about.
Yes.
Said she had bruises or whatever.
Yep.
And then, Don Staley yesterday took offense to that, which, defend your players. I tend to agree with her. And here, I'll give you the direct quote. She said, we're called something anytime that their team has success, we're called something other than players that are locked in. They play the right way and approach it the right way, whether they win or lose. We don't denounce anybody's play. They're always uplifting the game of women's basketball. And when we were getting our heads beat in by UConn for all those years, I said nothing. It does kind of feel like, because the worm has turned in this series, which South Carolina lost 7 straight before.
Yeah, and they lost all 5 in Hartford before Sunday.
It does feel like a little bit of like a sore loser sort of thing with Gino, after they've lost quite a lot lately.
Lost a national title game, lost Sunday, yeah.
But also, like we were talking a little bit before, it's just like, I don't want to like sit here and talk for a long time about race or anything. This is a sports podcast. But yeah,
it's relevant.
There was some connotation. It felt like there were some connotations that weren't.
I don't think there's any question. There's definitely, I'll say this, sitting in the room, listening to it, Gino knew what he was saying. I'll put it that way. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was saying without saying, but also when you say that, people know what you mean. Dawn definitely knew what he meant to say. I don't think there's any question about that. And Dawn did say today that, she's not expecting to hear from Gino about it or whatever. You know what he meant to say is kind of my thing. And you know what the implication was. And yeah, it does come out the wrong way. And it also hurt his own team, because that was a 4-point tech in a game his team lost by 4. You don't know if it was going to play out the same way after that, if the foul situation or whatever, but his team did lose that game by 4, and he lost his temper over something that maybe he shouldn't have lost his temper over in that moment.
When South Carolina got their own technical soon thereafter.
That's true. Cardoso got teed up. That was 2 points. So, okay, so maybe not. But
it did almost balance out, I guess, or whatever. But to me, if like watching the replay, it felt like there was a lot of fouls called, but it felt like it was called pretty equally.
It was. I don't have the number in front of me, but I know South Carolina had its highest number of fouls called on it in any game this year, which some of that is, you don't need to foul Auburn. You don't need to foul Vanderbilt 25 times. You can way out talent them. Like, I do understand that the tougher your competition is, the more you are going to foul, just because that's how basketball goes. But it's not like this was a completely lopsided game. Gino made a comment post-game about how, we shot a lot of free throws, but still not as many as them. The one play there's only one play I think UConn probably had a gripe with. That's the Zaya Cook handoff on the base, or not the baseline, on the sideline, where she is inbounding the ball late in the last minute, and she hands it off to another South Carolina player while she's still standing out of bounds. That should have been a turnover, but that's not what Gino's talking about. He's talking about physical stuff, beating up in the paint. If he had a gripe, it should have been that, honestly. Like if you're going to complain about the officiating, complain about the one they actually missed, I think, in South Carolina's favor. But there were plenty of calls that went both ways, and I do feel like the better team won that game, especially because you look at South Carolina goes from down 11 to up 12. So for a large chunk of that game, they won it by 23 points, that kind of margin. And yeah, I do think the better team won, but I think a tournament rematch, maybe in the Final Four, would be interesting, especially if UConn got healthy, although it still picked South Carolina to win it.
Yeah, I mean, from a national narrative standpoint, this back and forth between Gino and Don just adds more fuel to the fire. And I would love to see it. Yeah, I would love to see it again. And I think it is good for the women's game in general to have these sorts of rivalries. I know that I got bored watching UConn win every single year growing up from a national perspective or whatever. Anytime it came on, I'm like, okay, cool. They're a dynasty. They're dominant. But it's more fun when you have 2, maybe 3 with LSU coming to town. Indiana, of course, jumped them too. When you have a couple of teams that you feel like could still win it.
Yeah, no, and I think LSU's kind of, look, they do play Auburn tomorrow. Do have to, I don't want to say get it out of the way because you still have to win that game, but that's a team they beat by 52 points a month ago. It's on the road this time, but we're going to assume they take care of Auburn tomorrow night, which would mean Sunday afternoon, the only 2 undefeated teams left in the country, Columbia, South Carolina. It's Super Bowl Sunday, and that's going to feel like a Super Bowl.
No, and we talked early in the season that we didn't think that this team was going to go undefeated, but if they beat LSU,
it's hard not to. You really start throwing that out. Yeah,
you start to realistically think about that possibility. Of course, you still have to make it through the tournament stuff, but the out of conference schedule, they went to Stanford, went to UConn,
to Maryland, also a top 10 team.
Came out of all of those environments with wins, even though looked sloppy at times, didn't necessarily look dominant. All of those should come in handy tournament time. You've already been in some of those really tough environments.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I kind of lean in towards Sunday, just starting to look at LSU. You're playing matchups a lot. I do think it's ironic that Gino is talking about the officiating so much because I do think this game on Sunday, you have the 2 best post players in the country probably right now with Aaliyah Boston and Angel Reese at LSU. They're going to be banging and crashing all game. I believe it was Mike Neighbors, the Arkansas coach, who said about that game, the most important thing is to get a good officiating crew in because both those players could foul out if the officiating just is calling everything. This is going to be we're going to have a ton of preview content ready for a huge game on Sunday, but this is going to be a physical game. This is going to look a lot like it did against UConn both ways. You're going to see a lot of banging, a lot of crashing, a lot of diving for loose balls. And if the officials let it get out of hand, I wouldn't rule out technical fouls. You've got a pretty healthy dislike between Dawn Staley and Kim Mulkey too. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that. Obviously, I don't think there's a lot of love between these 2 teams either, just kind of as SEC rivals. They played a pretty close game in Baton Rouge last year that South Carolina won by, I think, 6. It's going to be a battle. I can't wait. Like I said, we're going to have a lot of content on LSU Sunday, but that is your regular season title. That is your 1 seed in the conference tournament. That's probably your number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. That is sending a message for maybe a rematch in the NCAA tournament or the SEC tournament. It is as big of a regular season game as you're going to find anywhere Sunday afternoon. Can't wait.
Yeah, and when you're looking at LSU's schedule, they definitely haven't been tested to the degree that South Carolina has, but they only had a 3-point win over Arkansas, which Arkansas is pretty good. They only have 4 losses, but by comparison,
yeah, South Carolina won the game by a lot, 46, 40, I think.
Yeah, 92 to 46.
Yeah.
They had a pretty close win versus Tennessee. Tennessee's not bad, 16-8. They beat them by 8 points.
Yep. And then Georgia was the main one for me where I was kind of looking at LSU like, that game went to overtime against the Georgia team that's not bad. I mean, there might be a tournament team, but a team South Carolina went on the road and beat by 16, I believe, or 17 when they went to Athens.
Yeah, and really, like lately, it seems like there's been a little bit of hangover for them or something. I don't know what's going on with them. Maybe maybe they've been prepping for this game for 2 weeks, but um, you got a 8 point win against Tennessee January 30th. You got a 5 point win against Georgia February 2nd, and a 6 point win against Texas A&M February 5th, leading into this game. And yeah, Texas A&M is like a 6-win team right now.
They're
Georgia's not that good.
last. Yep.
Yeah. So it does seem like they're not playing their best basketball at the moment, which is maybe why Indiana jumped them in the polls there. But they're still a very dangerous team. Nothing to be taken lightly. But if I had to put in a pick right now, just based on the way the teams are trending and the fact that it's a home, I probably, pretty clearly am picking South Carolina right now.
Yeah, and I'm very curious, just kind of from what I've watched of LSU this year a few times, they've kind of, I don't want to say they've won every game. I shouldn't say get rattled, but they do have a tendency when things aren't going well to kind of not turn it around quick. I mean, that A&M game on Sunday, that's an A&M team that's only won one conference game all year. Kind of, they were never trailing, but it was close all throughout. They were never really able to turn that around and kind of turn it into a blowout. I think this is a depth game, absolutely, for South Carolina. This is a game we're having. I mean, they only played 8 or I think 9 at UConn, but having 10, 11, 12, 13 players available is really important. And there's people listening, some of y'all might be going to the game, the Colonial Life Arena factor. I mean, I know LSU, the one thing is all those games you mentioned for LSU except A&M, they were at home. They played Tennessee at home. They played Georgia at home. They played Arkansas at home. They've not been in a road game like this with 18,000 people. I do think that might help South Carolina get off to a quicker start. You just feed off that energy quick. And then once you get off to a quick start with the bench coming in, the depth coming in, the Johnson Cardoso thing we just talked about, I don't want to say South Carolina is going to blow them out because I don't think that's going to happen. But I think there is a path where South Carolina starts fast where this could get out of hand and LSU is going to have to rein it in pretty quick.
No, because I mean, I remember as we were leading into the Arkansas game, we were hyping that one up a little bit as a potential close game, and it just never the game never really got on track. So if that were to happen and they get going in the first quarter and get the crowd behind them, I could see that happening for sure. Even if these teams are closer matched than whatever the final score ends up being. Anything else on women's basketball before we move on?
Oh, that's about what I had. Just keep it on the website. We got a lot of stuff coming with the Auburn game tomorrow, but obviously a lot of it geared around LSU Sunday. And I've got 3 stories up there, 2 free, 1 for subscribers from Hartford. So check that out. And I'll have some more subscriber stuff later in the week, women's basketball. You should keep your eyes peeled on that. And if you're not subscribed, come hang out. We've got live threads every game. You can come talk to me. You can ask me questions. You can get information. And plus you get all the other sports content too.
Yeah, totally. We had a live thread last night. Actually, there was someone hanging out. I was kind of surprised because it was a 9 p.m.
men's
tip-off
game
for the men's game, which the men are having a rough season as we kind of anticipated, and that was a pretty late start for a game that they were not expected to win on the road at Missouri, who is likely a tournament team. But I tell you what, over the last week, South Carolina's gone toe to toe with Arkansas and Missouri, both I think potentially tournament teams, middle of the pack SEC teams, and in some ways, I think this has been a good week for Lamont Paris in his first year. When you're looking for signs of growth and signs of what the future under him looks like. And I think that's in a couple of different ways, right? So obviously the on-the-court effort was pretty good against Arkansas and against Missouri. I think Hayden Brown should get some credit for the fact that it seems like he's taken some coaching and not having as many stupid fouls for the first time since December 30th. Last night was his 3rd straight game without fouling out, which is kind of crazy. But
I mean, yeah, he's been effective though. Like we've said it a lot, but active on the court for 30 minutes a night, Hayden Brown changes things a lot for this team. You saw it again last night, the way he was cutting to the basket and kind of making things happen.
I'd say offensively, especially. And another thing that I think maybe goes in Lamont Paris's positive column is him sort of attempting to rein in or coach and chastise his superstar, because after the Arkansas game, Gigi Jackson apparently went on his Instagram Live and also retweeted some things that were questioning the decision to not get him with the ball in his hands in the final possession in a game that they lost by 2 or had a chance to tie. And Gigi Jackson, to his credit, 18-year-old kid, when I was 18 years old, I didn't necessarily have the strongest handle on my emotions, especially after a loss or something like that, especially for a kid that probably before he got here hasn't lost that often. To his credit, did put out an apology the next day on Twitter, and kind of said the same thing, that he got caught up in the emotional response, that whole thing. But yeah, so he started off the game last night against Missouri on the bench, didn't come out for the first 7 minutes. And I think that was somewhat by necessity, because someone, I can't even remember who it was now, got in a little bit of foul trouble early, got 2 early fouls, and the bench is not very deep. But anyway, so I thought he did a good job handling it. It seemed like Gigi Jackson responded, had a pretty great game last night. 22 points total, I think. Very high percentage shooting, which the whole team had a high percentage shooting for most of that game. You posted a really good stat. I can't remember the exact number now, but basically they were over 70% shooting for a 20-minute stretch.
Yeah, it was from the last 10 minutes of the first half and the first 10 minutes of the second half. They were at 76%. I think it was 16 out of 21 shooting, which, and I think I texted you this at some point during the game. If they don't turn the ball over, I think it was 10 times in the first half, they probably win the game last night. They were pretty much getting whatever they wanted on offense. They're moving the ball well. I thought Michi Johnson played well again last night, at least with his distribution, and hit a couple deep threes too. The turnovers were the reason they lost that game, which in some ways is frustrating that you wasted a really good shooting night, but it's also something you kind of look at and going, okay, other things might be starting to come around.
Yeah, so I wrote the post game last night. South Carolina had a higher field goal percentage, higher 3-point percentage, more rebounds, and more points in the paint. Actually, I might have gotten the higher field goal percentage wrong, because they went 3 of 14 down the stretch, and it might have actually dropped them below Missouri's. I had already pre-written that part. I actually need to fix that. But anyway, but South Carolina had 14 turnovers that led directly to 18 Missouri points. And that's pretty much the difference in that game. I think Missouri had 4 or 5 turnovers that led to 4 points.
Yeah.
So that's a 14-point spread just based on easy baskets from turnovers.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the game was. And unfortunately for South Carolina, we kind of said it a few times this year about this team's not going to have a ton of opportunities to get wins, especially on the road. Kind of let one get away at Vanderbilt, lost that game in overtime after leading most of it. Let it get away at Georgia, leading by 12. I don't want to say they let one get away last night, because I think the better team definitely did win that game. But that was at least an opportunity, and there's 7 games left in the regular season now to try to get some more SEC wins. The good news for South Carolina, as you look at the schedule, it's going to soften up here a little bit. They're going to get an Ole Miss team who has only got 2 wins in the league this Saturday. They're going to get Vanderbilt, who they took to overtime on the road, coming back to CLA on Tuesday. And then next Saturday, they're going to LSU, who also only has 1 win in the conference right now. So these next 3 games, there's a chance to pick up a win, I think, in the next 3.
The key, and this is going to be, something indicative of how well Lamont Paris is coaching up the team and how much of the belief of the locker room he still has. If they can play as well as they played the last 2 games, they will definitely win 1, 2. They could win all 3 of those games if they played as well as they played the last 2 games. The question is, do they play down to their opponent?
Right.
Or do they continue to elevate the way that they have? And I think a lot of factors come to play in the way that they've played the last couple games, but a big part of it is Hayden Brown staying on the floor for the entire game. I think in general, the team has done a lot better job of attacking the basket. Gigi Jackson is getting more and more confident with his shot. And then a big maybe overlooked thing here is Josh Gray is come on,
literally big.
Yeah, literally big. Before last night, I think he was averaging 11 rebounds a game over the last 4 games, and I think he had another 7 last night.
He had 14 in 2 games in a row last week, Mississippi State and Arkansas.
Yeah, so I mean, if he can continue to play that aggressively, be a force under the basket, and either Hayden Brown, like a combo of Hayden Brown, Gigi Jackson, Chico Carter, and Michi Johnson can knock down some shots, then there's no reason that you don't get at least 2 of 3 of those games you mentioned.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking too. I think most of us before the year had this team at 3 or 4 SEC wins. You could argue they should already have that with some of the games they've let get away, but there's still a chance to do that. And nobody's saying that 3-15, 4-14 in the league is success. You're going to throw a parade about that, whatever. But there's a chance to at least get where you thought you were going to be, and also do it by finishing strong, taking some stuff into next year. And it starts with these next 3 games against 3 teams that are definitely more beatable than some other ones on your schedule. And one of them you already took to overtime on the road, and you're going to get them at home.
Yeah, and if you're looking ahead, I think last night gives you a little bit of a what could be look at South Carolina when you look at Missouri. Dennis Gates is someone that was actually rumored when the coaching carousel was going around for South Carolina. He ultimately ends up in Missouri, but he did a really good job this offseason. They really are only returning Kobe Brown as far as people that contributed last year. But he did a good job in the transfer portal, pulling people from JUCO, and he's put together a team that is at the very least on the bubble of the tournament. I think Lamont Paris is going to have to attack the portal hard, turn over some stones, continue to develop the freshmen that are going to be back, and then maybe next year we're looking at a little bit of a different narrative.
That's just what's going to have to be, and it's not trying to take shortcuts or not talk about it or whatever. There just needs to be more talent on this roster. That's kind of what it all boils back to. That's, like I said, that's a winnable game last night, but a better team with more talent made more plays down the stretch and won it. And that's happened a few times this year now.
From a coaching perspective, I do think I've seen growth in this team, and that's what you're looking for. Of course, they could turn around and spit in my face and play terrible.
I don't want to say you need, because where are they going anyway? But I kind of think you need at least one of these next 3 just to feel better about things.
No, I agree. Show that this 2-game stretch in which they've played pretty well is something that they can hold on to and sustain against inferior competition. Mm-hmm. As far as baseball goes, this weekend, those of you that are in South Carolina, they're doing like a fan fest kind of kickoff. Scrimmage. We don't actually know all the details of that yet. I'm sure that'll come out.
They're definitely going to scrimmage. They're going to have open scrimmage along with fan events Saturday at the ballpark. So if you're around,
and then next
Friday,
we have our first series. UMass Lowell is coming into town. Should be a pretty cupcakey start to the season.
You would certainly hope so.
But get out there to Founders Park and get some baseball. And
I got some preview content coming for y'all probably next week for baseball. It's kind of do women's basketball this week. We got LSU, we got UConn, but next week, once we're kind of counting down days to opening day, I'm going to have some baseball preview content for y'all. And then it's into crossover season starting next Friday.
How's the weather looking down there? You think it's going to be nice out for opening day next weekend?
I haven't looked at next Friday specifically. It's actually been pretty nice this week. Went for a walk today and it was in the 60s. That was nice. So fingers crossed that'll stay for this weekend for those of you going to the Fan Fest on Saturday and then through next weekend when the games actually count.
Definitely. So we'll have some season preview stuff for baseball coming up in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll start breaking down actual opponents. Other things to look out for on GamecockScoop.com. Obviously, we're going to continue to cover the women's basketball march towards hopefully a repeat, or their attempted march towards a repeat. We'll continue to cover men's basketball for those of you that are into sadomasochism and want to come watch those games with me. Honestly, it's fun, and like I said, you're seeing a future NBA star. You're seeing some growth, I think. So good time to start watching that. And then we're doing some football preview stuff for sure. I know that Perry McCarty's got a bunch of stuff in the queue, looking at the depth chart at each position. I'll have recruiting stuff continue to come. I think we'll get some more 2024 news before the month is over. And we'll just keep rolling along. So go check us out at GamecockScoop.com. Great time to become a subscriber here in the off season. If you're feeling like you're not getting enough football content right now while it's the off season, it's a good place to go check out some off season storylines. In the meantime, we'll keep podcasting and we'll be back here in about a week. This has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We will see you.